What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is that time. We have the pre-release tournaments coming up very soon for OP03. They'll be running from June 23rd through June 29th. I'm really excited and I wanted to make a video going over what I believe to be some of the more useful cards and some of the cards you should look out for and try and include in your deck if you're lucky enough to pick up some of them. But we do have, this beautiful pre-release tournament coming up shortly, and if you're not familiar with how these work, a lot of these events will be sealed deck events. So the way that you will construct them is after opening 6 packs that you will be given for purchasing yourself into the event, the player has to build a 40 card deck and a 10 Dawn card deck, of course. There are no banned or restricted cards, and players can include as many copies with the same card number as they like. So there's no 4 card limit. You could go up to 5, 6, 7 copies of a card. But, you know, with the 6 packs that you're opening, that can be pretty difficult to accrue that many copies of any card, realistically. But yeah, any cards left over from the deck construction are treated as sideboard. So if you want to change out some of your cards after your first match and you're like, you know what, I didn't really like this card, let me swap it out for another one, you can do that. And that's the beauty of these events. And I just want to go over some of the cards that you'll be finding in some of these packs, and let's check them out. Alright, so to start us out, I'm going to go over the 2K counters that you're going to find in these OP03 packs. 2K counters will be invaluable to be able to get out of certain attacks, to be able to defend yourself, but also some of these are very playable. I would say that I personally won't be playing too many of these on the board. I would more or less keep them in hand just for defense, but we do have Kaya here. Draw 2 cards, trash 2 cards, and it's a really wonderful 2K counter. Could be used if you need to cycle out some cards from your hand. We also have Vergo. Vergo is kind of an interesting card because this is something that you could see play in the pre-release event because it can't be KO'd by battle. That is huge. It has to be KO'd by some form of a card effect, and with these pre-release events, you're not going to be able to see that very much. So Vergo might just be game winning for this pre-release. Now, the 2K counter is also pretty dang good, but if you can pick up a few of these, that's huge. It's going to be very hard for your opponent to get rid of them. Next, we have Khalifa. Khalifa is, you know, you could play the card. It's like a, Kaya that you could draw 2, trash 2, but it is one of those that it feels kind of bad putting it down for 4 costs to try and use that. I think I would rather keep this in hand. Kaya seems very playable just because it's 1 Dawn. You're not losing too much of a tempo. Although you do get a 4K body on board with this, I think Khalifa's better off just being a 2K counter in hand. Next, you have Hachan. Hachan, for sure, 2K counter in hand. Just going to keep it that way. Then we have Khalifa yet again. This is another 4 cost 4K. That's when attacking, Dawn -1, draw 2 cards, discard 1 from your hand. So it does cycle through some stuff. It does have its use, but the Dawn -1 is, you know, It's just if you happen to be ahead and maybe you're up, like you have 8, 9 Dawn at this point, that's not a bad card to put down because, you know, you're going to get those 2 Dawn back every turn. And this is basically just giving you 1 extra card draw per turn, which is pretty great, honestly. But we also have Sanji. I think Sanji is going to be a really interesting 2K counter. If you can pick this card up, it's something that I probably am just going to keep as a 2K counter, but there are those moments where you start a game, and if you play this on your turn 1, it's free card draw. It's absolutely amazing. It's such a good card. And I run this obviously in all of my yellow decks, but this will be a really nice one for the event as well. Then we also have Strusen. Strusen is very interesting. I'm going to go over the blockers here in a moment, but if I recall correctly, I don't believe there's any 1-cost blockers. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that there were no 1-cost blockers. But this would be a nice card against, you know, some 1-cost blockers as well as other 1-cost, but it's just, I would imagine this is just going to stay as a 2K counter in hand and not be used for the on-play effect since it has such a low stat line. Next, let's go over the blockers, and these blockers are going to be so important for maintaining your life, but also protecting cards you have on your board. And Honestly, there'll be great counters in hand and just a lot of use that you will get out of having these for low costs on the board. And first we have Fossa. Fossa is a 2-cost 2k blocker with 1k counter. Very simple, as straightforward as it gets. Then we have Limb. Limb is really interesting. 3-cost 2k blocker, 2k power blocker with no counter. But I love the effect. The opponent's turn, when this card is KO'd, give -2000 to one of your opponent's leaders or characters. This can stop a follow-up swing at your characters or your life. So I think that this card will be really interesting, and having it in there definitely going to throw off your opponent's momentum. And then we have Karn. Karn is one of the more unique blockers in this, because in the pre-release, I would never use it outside of this pre-release event particularly. I think that this card is super interesting here though, because you have a 3-cost 3k blocker with 1k counter that on your opponent's turn, if your deck has 20 or less cards, this character gains plus 3000 power, bringing it up to a 6k blocker. Now, this isn't too hard to achieve, because with a 40 card deck, you have 5 in life, well, assuming 5 in life, unless you're running a 4-cost or a 4-life leader, 5 in life and then 5 in hand. And getting down to 20 or less cards isn't going to take very long, especially if you have card draw and other things that are going on. This could be extremely useful. Extremely useful. So I had to definitely include it in here. Next, we have the 3-cost 3k power 1k counter blocker Fukuro. It's not going to get much usage out of it. It cannot be KO'd by card effects, simply because there aren't too many that you're most likely going to find in the 6 packs that you're given for the pre-release event, but it is still an absolutely incredible blocker for the event. Next, we have Bluno. Bluno is one of those cards that I'm not going to include in the when I'm going over the black cards here in just a few minutes, because I have it here as a blocker, but it's still an attacker nonetheless. This card, you can slap 1 Dawn underneath and you can give it blocker. It also has 1k counter, and if you're able to get the on KO effect to work, like if you have a CP card that's already trashed, like let's say Khalifa that we were just talking about earlier, you trash her for a 2k counter, you can then play her when Bluno is KO'd, which can be absolutely huge, and just, you know, it recycles a card onto the board, and you'll be able to use her on play effect. There's many usages that this card you can find yourself in. We also have Pearl, which is a 2-cost 2k power with 1k counter. It's very similar, you know, to the very beginning card. And then another one as well, we have Chimney and Ganbei right here with 2, 2, and 1k counter. Then we have Charlet. Charlet is pretty interesting because I like the fact that you're able to set up looking at your own life or your opponent's life, and you can put convenient cards either at the top or bottom to kind of plan out how your play will be once you get down to a lower life, or what your next play would be depending on what your next life is. So really love this card, and I think this will be really interesting to have in there. And last but not least, Charlotte Galette, 2-cost 2k power, 1k counter. Nice little blocker. Lastly, we're going to go over some of the cards that you're definitely going to be looking for in those 6 packs that you get at the tournament. You're definitely going to want to run a lot of vanilla cards. These are just great stat line cards that have decent cost and are pretty much going to be your bread and butter for, you know, taking down your opponent. But let's go ahead and hop into the cards that, you know, have effects as well as, you know, on play, when attacking, on KO, all kinds of stuff that will really help bring that deck to the next level. Starting with the red cards. Flamenco is a 2-cost 3k power body that the card allows you to lower your opponent's cards to put them within KO range. It's a great turn 1 or turn 2 play for controlling the board. We have Curiel, a 3-cost 4k power body, decent stat line, but what makes the card usable is the effect for rush on the turn that you play it. Haruta, 2-cost 3k body. This is essentially a free Dawn each turn to give yourself an edge over your opponent for taking over board control. Marco, 5-cost 6k power, and I want to go ahead and say this just so that you know for the rest of the video, this is a super rare card. it will be hard to pull this card. It will be hard to pull other super rare cards, but I am going to mention them just in case you do. Now this card will KO lower cost cards and potentially even bring the card back by discarding an event card to keep him in the fight. That stat line alone though makes the card a threat for your opponent. Fire Fist. This will work great as a trigger, but might also have some use to swing the match in your favor by using the effect to KO 2 characters from the board. Alright, on to the blue cards now. We have Usopp, 4 cost, 5k power body. This card can be used to close that game to finish it out or deal with rested characters efficiently. You're not really looking to swing at the leader to use the Dawn X1 effect because you don't want to trash 7 cards for it, but rather you just want to swing 5k at life or simply to try and remove characters from your opponent's board. Zeph is a 5 cost, 6k power body, another card that the effect isn't the objective with, but bouncing a character off the board for just the cost of 2 cards from the top of your deck is actually really nice. The stat line is where it shines, forcing a 2k counter out of your opponent when you're attacking for lead or clearing board very easily. Sogeking. This is a secret rare, so yet again, don't expect to pull this, but you know, if you do, just gonna go over it. You got a 7 cost, 6k power body. It's also got 1k counter. If you're lucky enough to pick it up though, it does have that counter. It's also got a great on play effect. Bounce a card with 6 or less back to your opponent's hand, and with 6k power, the card can be a threat on board. Sanji's Pilaf. You draw 2 cards. Not much to say. This can be very useful in securing counters as well as useful cards for your current and or next turn plays. 3000 Worlds. The utility of removing a 5 cost or less from play can be game winning depending on the situation. This card is a no-brainer to gain some tempo. Next we have green. Butchie is a 4 cost 5k power. This will be used mostly for having 5k power, but the on play effect could potentially get rid of 2 cost vanillas and other cards that might be effectively causing issues on the board. Chu is a 4 cost 3k power. It's the opposite idea of Butchie, where this card lacks in power. It makes up for it with its effect. KOing a 4 cost or less rested character will be useful and free up other swings for your characters and or leader. The trigger is also just an added bonus to the card. Then we have Django. 5 cost, 6k power. I don't see the on play of this card being extremely useful, but it could be very situational. Just having the 6k power body on board is enough for it to shine. Krieg, we've got a 6 cost, 7k power, truly a game-winning card if you're able to pull this in any of your packs. It creates tempo, gives you a very hard target for your opponent to deal with, and potentially 2 life through a double attack swing on life. Next we have the purple cards, and I started with Tilestone. We have 5 cost, 6k power. The effect isn't relevant, just another large swing to play on the board though. We also have Rob Lucci, 5 cost, 6k power. Great stat line complemented with the ability to rest blockers or vanillas that would otherwise be inconvenient or threatening. Polly, 5 cost, 6k power. The on-play effect is very niche, is a very niche situation to play, but it could be pretty late game removal card if it's timed correctly. But yet again, just another 5 cost, 6k power body on the board, so nothing wrong with that. Mino Zebra, 4 cost, 5k power. The card is already useful for being 5k, but the banish is what makes your opponent respect this card quite a bit. This will draw out counter cards out of your opponent's hand or force your opponent to lose card draw through taking a life. Mino Rhinoceros, 3 cost, 5k power. Decent stat line, that's all. Monkey D. Luffy, 6 cost, 7k power. If you're able to use the effect, it could be nice to gain rush, but otherwise this is still just a very playable card to threaten your opponent. We've got Kaku, 5 cost, 6k power. Another great card to use banish. Yes, the Dawn -1 is inconvenient, but in a sealed format, that won't be as detrimental to your overall plays as it would be in a constructed deck. Top Knot is a wonderful removal event card, can be useful for blockers, high stat line vanillas, you name it. Gum Gum Jet Gatling. This is a tricky little counter card that your opponent might not be expecting and can potentially put the match in your favor. There's just a few black cards worth mentioning, but they will probably be difficult to pull since they're mostly either super rares or higher. We have Kaku, 5 cost, 6k power. Honestly, if you're able to get the effect off for this one, well done. I see it more as just a high power body to have on board. Lucci, 6 cost, 7k power. Yet again, the effect would be great to use, but don't count on it. More so just for the power that the card provides. Isho, 8 cost, 9k power. If you're lucky enough to pick this card up, Isho can absolutely crush your opponent's plans with the card removal from hand. Either way, it is a phenomenal threat to have on board. It's also synergizing well with other cards that relate to the cost of characters. 6 King Pistol, another sneaky event card that could be useful in some situations in bringing your leader or character up to survive that attack. And lastly, Yellow. Sparrow is a 3 cost, 5k power, a great card to play for its cost, and if you get lucky, you might hit the KO effect. Where this card really shines though is the trigger. Being able to cheat the card out will spell bad news for your opponent. Cracker is a 4 cost, 5k power, another great card to have if your opponent terrified of. Also an amazing trigger effect, and to be able to cheat that card out. The double attack effect is usually scary enough that it forces out multiple counters or puts you ahead on life, and simultaneously is something that not everyone's aware of, is as long as you have a Dawn underneath Cracker, even if it's not your turn, if you have less life than your opponent, the card will still gain the plus 1000. Katakuri, 8 cost, 8k power. This is a secret rare, so you know if you can pull it, that's pretty huge. But this card can essentially add one of your, let's say, more useless characters on the board to your life, so you can add your own life, or you could remove something from your opponent's board that is, you know, really creating a threat or being a little pesky, and put it in their life, you know. But it does cycle out some of those cards and gives you some good board removal and a great body on board. 10 cost Big Mom, 10 cost, 12k power, game winning card. This will be one of the best pickups from the packs you can get. You gain a life, your opponent loses one, and then you have a character that essentially will not be KO'd on board. It is a truly terrifying card. And last but not least, Ikaku Sovereignty. It's just simply a great counter event card. A lot of people will try and swing for 9,000 into your leader, and this will pump you up to 10k. Run a few of them if you pick them up. Yeah, and that's it. I think that this is going to be such a fun event. I can't wait to play in it, and I hope that you guys do well. I hope the video helps in any way, shape, or form. Other than that, just let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one, all right? Peace.